Welcome everyone to this virtual trip to El Salvador, one of the series of virtual trips that Algrano has been organizing this year. We started because of coronavirus and we're seeing that there's a lot of engagement with it. So it's something that we're planning to do every month. And today we're going to a region in El Salvador called El Bálsamo Quetzaltepec. That's where Karla farm is and is very near San Salvador. So it's very close to the city, very easy to get to. And just introducing you our guests or our hosts, let's say. So first we have Karla. I don't know if Karla wants to say hello.
Hello.
Karla is a coffee producer. She's a Q grader. She's involved in many different projects, like with the group of denomination of origin in her region. She was also a lead scholar with the SCA, and she's like very vocal about her beliefs and like the importance of supporting women in coffee, transparency, etc. Thank you for joining us today, Karla.
Thank you.
And then we have Casey as well from Ghost of Grind. So Casey is the founder and head roaster, head of coffee, head of everything in Ghost of Grind. I don't know if you want to say hello, a few words about yourself as well, Casey.
Hello. Yep, that is me. I'm not head of everything, but all things kind of coffee sourcing and roasting related.
Thanks for joining us, Casey. And Casey is here today as well because both her and Karla, they have been connected for quite a few years now. And there's a very nice story of how they first met through Instagram. And so if you go to Ghost of Grind website, you see some coffees from Karla there. And then we have a surprise guest. But I don't know if she's here yet. Can you find her, Christina?
Yep.
Nice one. So last minute, I invited Sierra from the Core Directive in the UK to join us. Sierra is a friend. We met when she lived in Manchester, and she's also very vocal about women in coffee. And so that's why I wanted to invite her to join the conversation. She also knows Karla and Casey pretty well, so I think she can add a lot to this conversation. Hey, Sierra. Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Totally crashed the party. Sorry I'm late, guys, but hello. I'm very honored to be here. Just fangirling, I think, because I know a fair number of people on this panel, and I'm just like, yes, this is amazing. So yeah, thanks for having me, and all the familiar faces.
Thanks for joining, Sierra. And as I was telling Karla and Casey before, it's pretty informal. So just jump in if you want. When they're talking about stuff, you can comment. So feel free to join, to ask questions, etc. So the first stop in our little trip is Algrano, of course. So just to tell to people that don't know a lot about us. So what is Algrano? So it's like Algrano is this digital platform. It's created in Switzerland with the idea of connecting coffee producers and coffee roasters so they can negotiate and trade directly or as directly as possible and in a very transparent way as well. So in Algrano, we allow roasters to, we provide this customized logistics so they can bring coffee from the origin to Europe. They can consolidate different orders in shipments from different countries so we can optimize the container space. We do financing and warehousing for coffee, road transport. So it's pretty much like a door-to-door service. And we can also offer quality assurance and good prices for the service of logistics as well. We always have new features. So we have Christina here from our tech team. The tech team is always driving the company in terms of like making roasters' lives and producers' lives easier. So one of the features that we recently released is called My Orders. Christina, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yep, so this is a new display that we're testing out for roasters. So you can see all of your orders in one place and you get some reminders about tasks that you might want to carry out it's something that we're testing, and we're trying to add on more and more tools for roasters. So we created this with the help of a lot of roaster feedback, and we're always looking for more. So if you are working with us, please do feel free to send me an email or email your sales manager or info@algrano.com. And we're always happy to hear what you think and make improvements based on what would work for you.
Awesome, thanks, Christina. And if you go to the platform as well, you see that you can find the profile of Karla's farm, which is called Finca San Antonio Amatepec. And you can find coffee lots from her as well. We actually don't have, we haven't received the samples from Karla yet. They're on the way. And so her coffees will be live and ready to sample, to cup very shortly. And you should, if you follow her, you should probably receive a notification as well. And just to let everyone know that we're gonna go through Karla's farm. She's gonna talk about it. We're gonna visit Casey's roastery as well. So she's going to show us around a little bit. And then we have a Q&A. But if you want to join the conversation at any point, because we want this to be like as natural and as comfortable as possible for everyone, feel free to like raise your hand and we can promote you as a panelist as well, so you can engage more in the conversation. All right, so next stop, San Salvador. Christina, play the video, and yeah, we can go to Karla's farm.
Okay, I'm really excited about this. And I also want to start off by saying that if you're ever interested in buying a farm in El Salvador, this is the moment when you have to see a farm, because right now is when the plants are the most stressed. It hasn't rained in months. So everything that you see, it's going to look very dry and a little bit sad, maybe even. It might be a little shocking. But this is the moment when you see like the real status of the farm and what it's looking like. So you'll see like it's very different, a farm in the dry season and a farm versus the rainy season. And right now we're at the end of the dry season, so it's looking very stressed, but it's still very pretty. So I'm really excited.
Can you see my screen now with the video?
I can.
Yes. Okay, so the way that we go to our farm, it's very close to San Salvador, to the city. So that's where I live. And it is maybe from my doorstep, like 15 minutes away. It's extremely close. And we go on this street that takes you, this highway that takes you to the airport. You make a little detour and then you start going up, 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 up. And this is sort of it. Our farm is on a mountain called Cerro de San Jacinto. And a fun fact about it is that that is where there used to be this really old theme park back in the day, prior to the Civil War and everything happening. So that was one of like the few spaces in El Salvador where people could go and like have some fun. And that was kind of like a small Disneyland for El Salvador. Very random, but that's where it was located because it was so close to the city. So then right now we're still going a little bit up. And right now we are reaching the gate of the farm. And right there you can see the logo for Rainforest Alliance. And fun fact is that people used to refer to it as the frog farm in the area. They were like, oh yeah, the frog farm. But it's mostly because of that. So as you can see, things are looking really, really dry. And this is the base of the farm, the lower part. So if you see on the side of the streets, like it's very rocky, the surface, like there shouldn't be anything there ideally. And you can see the view there from all of San Salvador. So it's really almost like a miracle that things are growing in that region, because that part used to be a stone quarry that belonged to an architect. And he was basically like blowing up parts of the hill so that he would do his construction work with that, because it was so rocky. But then it became a coffee farm. And my dad, he loves nature. He's like a very old-fashioned environmentalist. So he started growing all of these coffee trees and turning the stone quarry into a coffee forest. And you can see a lot of the pine trees and eucalyptus trees. And those are really like the things that he loves the most. And you can start seeing how the ground looks super dry, and the plants look a little bit stressed, but this is exactly what makes them start to flower. And right now we're driving into my dad's house. And you can see that part that is a little bit gated is where he's growing the grass again, because he has chickens and they're eating all of the seeds of the grass. So it's almost impossible. It's been like that for like 4 years already, but he's still hopeful that he'll have grass. And those are some of the dogs.
It's my favorite bit.
Yeah, that's Tira and Rex. They're huge babies.
Just
They're
one
really
question.
big dogs.
Sorry to interrupt, Karla. Is it jittery for everyone, or is the video okay?
It seems fine. Oh, that's my dad, by the way. Yeah. And that is Tira. Those are the chickens that keep eating the grass and everything, really. And you can see the view. That is Lake Ilopango. And the fun fact about that lake is that it's actually a volcanic lake. So there are like random currents of warm water happening as you're taking like a dip in that water. It's really cool and it's really, really pretty. And those are the plants. My dad has this obsession with orchids. So then he has like all of these plants in his house. He really, really loves them. And they're really pretty. That one's one of my favorite. It's called, the translation is like scrambled eggs with like chorizo, the name, because it looks like that. So that's really fun. And now we're driving through the farm, and that part is actually wild, like completely wild. There is no coffee growing there, and we've left it as a natural barrier between different coffee lots, and also as a place for plants and animals to just live their life, because it's one of the few areas remaining close to the city where like animals can live and thrive. That tree is an amate tree, and it's massive. And if you look at it, they're all interconnected and intertwined, and they're actually like holding on to each other. And right now, with the rains that we had, one of them fell down, and the one that fell was actually the one that wasn't interconnected and holding on to the other. So that was really sad, but also really interesting.
I remember for me, when I saw it, it made me feel like I was in the Lord of the Rings or something like that.
Yeah,
It's crazy too.
it's beautiful. And when it's raining, it looks super nice with all of like the rain.
What kind of altitude are you in when you're in that part of the farm? Because I know you can go a bit higher up.
Yes, so that
there?
part is like 1,000, like 1,100 more or less meters. And now we're going into the part that I was telling you that used to be a theme park. So if you see now, we have a paved road, which is super unexpected in a coffee farm. And it's because that originally was not a coffee farm, it was a theme park. And to the left of that area where there were all of these flowers is where the bumper cars used to be. And now it's very random. And then we have some banana trees, which we love also.
Did you plant them yourselves?
No, those are wild. They just popped up and we kept them because they're really tasty. And these are massive mango trees as well, which we also really, really love. And you can see the lake from a lot of different points of the farm, and it's really, really beautiful. And the volcano that is behind it, it's called Chinchontepec volcano. It's also really pretty. And this part that we're taking right now, we call it the part where there was this little train that used to go through that farm, through that part of the farm. So then that is really nice. And there we have some coffee plants. As you can see, their leaves are like a little bit sad, and it's because they're really stressed right now because it hasn't rained in months. But it's supposed to start raining in a few weeks. So then that is going to be really exciting, and you'll see it starting to flower. And you can see my dad there. He's waving. And there you can see my sister.
All of you are involved in the farm, right, Karla? You
Yes.
and both your sisters.
Yeah.
But you're more involved, I'd say, is it like more in the post-harvest part? So you're more like into processing and the quality control, right?
Yes, we've all like divided roles, but we're all really involved in most things, honestly.
No, I remember when you told me the story about how you got involved and being at an event with your dad and someone saying, oh, I'm sorry that you only have daughters because who's going to take over the farm after?
Yes.
Like, that was crazy.
Yeah. Oh, and that's my dad. He wanted to show you how he prunes his trees. So that's literally what he does. He drives around and he has like all of his equipment and he'll start pruning different plants. And if you see those trees, like they fell with the root, like they completely fell. And those were our shade trees. So then those storms are just really, really strong. And right there, he's removing like one of the like branches, one of the arms of the tree. And it's because ideally there should be either 2 or 3. And this one had like 5 of them. So we removed a few.
Why 2 or
And this
3?
way, because that way the energy of the plant, I guess, is more concentrated on like certain areas and it's not as dispersed. So it allows the plant to focus on like, okay, we're going to focus on like these cherries only instead of like a bunch of them. That's a cicada, and from what I've read, they live like a lot of years under the earth and then they come out for like a few days and then they die, which is really sad. But you can find their shells everywhere, which is pretty cool. We used to wear them as brooches when we were kids and it was like really cool. And those are these little tomatoes. They grow everywhere. And this is a new lot that we recently planted, and it's of Maragogipe, which is this like massive coffee bean. And we think that maybe this year, like 21-22, year 21-22 might be the first time that they are productive. But as you can see, it suffered most of the damage from the rain because you have all of these like massive shade trees that were completely uprooted with the rains. We think that maybe that part is where the storm came from because that part faces the ocean. So that's where the storm came from. And it just completely uprooted these massive trees. So now we have to go back and replant some shade trees there. That way they're not as stressed.
And it was your aunt Maritza on the
Yeah.
tomato trees, right? On the tomato
Yeah. Oh, and those are some mango trees that we also have. They're really great. We were just like eating all of these mangoes.
They're very tiny though.
Yeah, they are still not ripe. So then we love green mangoes, which is a way of eating mangoes in El Salvador. So then they're still not ripe. So then they're a little tart and a little sour, but they're really good. I highly recommend it if you can get your hands on them.
I can
And
see
that
Sierra is nodding, so I think she knows.
Yeah.
I saw a recipe for it a couple days ago on your social media, Karla, and I was just like,
oh yeah,
I'm missing that. It's amazing.
It's so tasty. Mangoes are honestly great at all parts of like their cycle. They're really tasty. So then this is where one of the main areas that used to be the theme park, which we now use as a drying patio. And here you would have, back in the day, all of these arcade games. So then you could win like stuffed animals and things like that. But now it's become a drying patio, which is a very different use, I guess, than what was intended.
Much more dignified use of the space, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then right now we're driving into one of my favorite parts, which is the main drying patio. So then when this theme park was active, you used to get to it through airlifts, like gondolas. So then that is where you would arrive, I guess. And the view is completely amazing. I love it. To the left, you can see all of the center of San Salvador, which is amazing, like all of the old historic buildings. And then to the right, you see the lake, which is really impressive to see as well. And there we were covering some of the coffee that was left. This is already like the coffee that is left over that we've picked so that the coffee board doesn't go in there and reproduce. So, and it's one of our methods of like controlling it a little bit. So then the quality of this coffee is definitely not the best, but we pick it in order to control the coffee borer. So then here you can see some of the
what do you do with
views.
that coffee, Karla? Do you sell it? Do you give away?
We sell it. It's a funny story. So that coffee, we actually sell it locally, but we sell it to a local instant coffee company. So then it actually gets turned into instant coffee, which is weird because most instant coffee, it's absolutely disgusting. But this one, since they actually buy some Arabica coffee, even though they're using like not the best, it's actually not as horrible. I don't recommend it, but it's not as disgusting as you would expect it to be. But that is some of the views that you can see from that part. So then when the coffee is drying on that patio, it actually takes a really long time because it gets a lot of humidity from all of these different conditions that it has around, but then it also gets a lot of these breezes that come in from different parts of the city and from the lake.
Is it San
And that's,
Salvador
yeah.
that you can see?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's in Salvador and it's right the center of the capital. So then you have all of these like very old historic buildings and cathedrals that you can see from there. And every day around, I think it's like 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. that you see it all light up, and it's really, really beautiful.
I liked
Those are the dogs.
I liked how you filmed the dog having a wee on the tree.
Yeah, he lives near the patios. So then whenever we drive out of it, he like walks with us. He's one of my favorites. His name is Chester, and he belongs to everyone and absolutely no one at the same time because he bumps from house to house, and we sometimes see him in the town that he's like staying with someone, and then he randomly shows up in the farm, and then he has another family. So it's like we don't know what he does, but we love him, and he probably has like 7 different homes and 7 different names, but he's still very, very cute and very sweet. Yeah, community dog, definitely. So then now we're driving back, and those massive trees that you can see from the side of the road, those are actually the maragojipes. That one, the one that my dad is pruning right now. So then if you see it, it's like abnormal size. The leaves are gigantic, and it's called the elephant plant because of that, because it's so big. And those trees are actually really old, and they were planted by the previous owner of the farm, and we think that he planted them only along the side of the road simply because they're so impressive to see. So then we took seeds out of it and we've replanted that whole area that I showed you previously. So our production right now is very limited and only comes from these like very few plants. What makes it really hard to grow is that it's like best friends with coffee rust. So then when we first found them, they were completely orange. So then they've been rehabilitated and it's been a whole thing, but we're really proud of that. And those little flowers that you see, like green buds, once it rains and we have a really, really, really good rainfall, then they're going to bloom like 10 days after the rainfall. So then that's what we're looking forward to right now at the farm. After this huge stress, water stress that the plants have gone through, we're waiting for it to rain. And once it rains, a few days later, the flowers will bloom, and then the whole farm just smells like jasmine. It's really beautiful to see. And it looks a little bit like it snowed, so it's very different. And after that, then the cycle, it turns into a coffee cherry and it starts to mature until it gets picked towards the end of the year. So that's basically like the cycle of the coffee plant on our farm.
And you mostly grow Bourbon, or do you have other varieties as well?
Yeah, so we mostly grow Bourbon and Pacas. Since it's an older farm, that is what it was planted with, because those were, I guess, this was like pre coffee rust days. So then those were very like noble and like good plants to grow. But now that we have all of these different conditions and you have climate change to take into account, there are some rust resistant varieties. So we have Cuscatleco and we have Costa Rica and all of these different varieties. We don't really sell those abroad because the quality isn't the best, but for volume, they're pretty good since they're mainly resistant. And then we also have yellow Ikatu, which we grew a few years ago. We planted along the area that used to be surrounded by the train tracks of the park, of the theme park. And that one is really nice. It's very juicy, very fruity, and we really like it a lot. And the new area that we've planted is the Maragogipe area, but as you saw, the plants are still like a little bit tiny. So soon there will be more of it, but right now, not really. It's mostly coming from those few trees that you saw.
Are you already like keeping an eye on it, Casey, so you can like order it as soon as it's ready to go?
Yeah, I just tasted some. It's incredible. So I think we're taking a very small lot, whatever that means. But yeah, it's super good.
And
yeah, so Casey,
sorry,
oh,
go.
sorry. Yeah, no, so Casey's taking the few beans that came out of those trees that you saw. And it's really exciting because the thing with those trees is that they're massive, but their productivity is extremely low. So people simply don't like them because they're also they attract rust a lot and their productivity is very low. And they also like to eat a lot of like fertilizer and things. So then that's why it's a very rare variety, I guess, to see, because it's not good to grow. But the flavor, it's very different and it's just something completely different. I really, really enjoy it.
How would you describe it, Casey?
Peachy. Yeah, it was super fruity, very, very different to Bourbon and your other varieties. Yeah, it was incredible, really floral, but yeah, lots of peach.
Nice, Casey. I think now that we've been to Karla's farm, it's been nice if we can see a little bit of your roastery. And if you guys can talk a little bit about your relationship as well, because I think you guys are very nice showcase of how a good partnership between a roaster and a producer can be. So if you guys can say a little bit more about how you met and how the partnership has evolved over the years, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, sure. That was really hard to follow because it's so gorgeous there. I'm literally in like a gray tin shed. It used to be a pig shed. So it's really not that beautiful. And I won't show you outside because there's a dusty car park. But yeah, Karla and I started talking about, we can't remember, we were just talking about this 4 years ago, I think.
It's something like that, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And it was Karla introduced herself through an email and said, you know, I like what you do and can we send you samples? Got some samples, loved the coffee. And then we kind of took it from there and had to work out how to get the coffee from Karla to here. And we did, and it's kind of, yeah, been working with each other ever since. And we've done quite a few talks now together now. Yeah.
And you usually get like you have a natural and a washed coffee. I guess this year will be only natural, right, Karla? Because you only made naturals for specialty this year. Which one is your favorite, Casey?
I like them all, but I do really love the naturals. I think they're super tasty. And we use Karla's coffee for, well, a lot of our cafes use it as their house espresso. It's definitely a crowd favorite. They love it. Yeah, I can show you a little bit of the roastery. Like I said, it's not very exciting. This is our little brew area where I sample roast all the coffee and do some cupping. And this is.
Ooh, can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. This is our little. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So our little tiny roaster.
Can't hear you again.
I'm gonna stay over here.
I think you keep
Okay.
putting your hand on the microphone.
I'm gonna stay right here and not touch it. Okay. So yeah, we keep our coffee over there. And yeah, I'll just say for people who don't know, we started Girls Who Grind Coffee in 2017 as a way to address the gender inequality in our industry. And so we source all of our coffees from female producers. And we do this because women have a lot of barriers up against them to accessing land ownership and financing and training and all of these things that will prevent women from becoming financially dependent. So we actively seek out female producers. And there's loads of them and they're all amazing. And so that's why we do that. And oh, thanks, Lucia. And yeah, that's us and that's what we do. And we love working with Algrano. So part of what I see as a barrier is access to the market. So working with Algrano for me is so great because it not only allows us to bring coffee in, but it allows producers to access loads of other buyers in the UK and the rest of Europe.
And so one thing that I remember you were telling me that is very interesting about how you source coffee as well is that you don't cut blind, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because you hear a lot of roasters like say first and foremost they look for cup quality, and that's not how we do things. I feel like we're only going to be able to do that when we can guarantee that every producer on the table has had equal access to everything required to make sure their coffee is a certain quality, and that's not happening right now. So I feel like we can't ignore that. So for us, quality is way more than just what's in the cup. So we first and foremost, we seek out women to work with. We seek out organizations like Beam Voyage who are actively training and educating women and giving them access to that quality. And so yeah, we don't believe in blind cupping because we want more than just the cup quality to define quality.
Sierra, come on, unmute yourself and just say what you want to say.
I'm just nodding along and dancing along to like literally what everyone's been saying, but a couple of really good points, Casey and Karla, that you brought up. Like I love that, Casey, that you're doing essentially affirmative action for women in coffee. And I think that like that's so important because there's that myth of meritocracy where it's like, let's just cut blind because that's how it should be and that's fairness. And it's like, well, no, like you can't talk about fairness at the table when gender equity is in the conversation, like and all sorts of inequities is being discussed at the moment, which I love. And for those of you that don't know, obviously Louisa's introduced me. I do run a feminist organization, but separately I know these two women, Karla and Casey. Casey and I did our Q grader certification together. That was amazing. Karla helped me out with Q as well by sending me stuff, and me and Karla know each other separately. And we've had so many discussions about quality as a discussion, as both an objective and a subjective discussion. And a lot of what we talk about, correct me if I'm wrong, Karla, but like is about how quality is defined from a very Eurocentric point of view. So when you talk about like the tasting wheel and stuff like that, they're all flavors and they're all standards that don't necessarily capture the story behind the coffee, and that alienates and ostracizes a lot of coffee that would otherwise be good, and be drinkable and sellable. So and that's very interesting from a Q grader perspective, where you're like, yes, I get that there needs to be an objective score to have this specialty work as a system, but we have to start thinking about accessibility, which is why I love the work and the advocacy that both these women do in their own spheres of influence. And Yeah, there's not very much I can add to this conversation apart from being a massive fangirl. I've just been dancing here. So, but thank you so much for your perspectives, like, and for the work that you do. So.
But Casey, do you, so would you buy coffee as well if it's like, it's a lower, like the quality is not exactly what you're looking for, but if you like the story of that organization or of that farmer, if you believe on the work that they're doing, you still go for it despite the fact that the quality is not exactly there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a really good reason to do that is because when producers are given access to buyers, and in particular access to direct relationships, then the quality is going to improve. So when you know somebody and you can put a face to the name, you want to do better work. So I know, I've heard from producers we work with, year in and year out, that they want to provide our customers with a quality drink. And when you know someone, you will work harder. And it's a bit it can be difficult and it gets emotional at times. So when I'm cupping a coffee, I know whose coffee that I'm cupping, and I go into it thinking, I know I'm gonna buy this coffee no matter what. And then you can have conversations. So like with Karla last year, there was quite a lot of insect damage. And then we had a conversation about it. And Karla shared with me what they were doing on the farm to fix that. So it's, I guess some people would have tried that coffee and said, oh, there's quite a lot of insect damage, I'm not going to take that, instead of having a conversation about how that can be improved and working together. So I think that when you have these direct relationships, quality will come out of it.
Casey, I got a question for you. What do you think is stopping more roasters and more coffee companies from shifting to this model that you are proposing, where it's, like accounting for the story, accounting for, very human and very circumstantial things that happen? I know last year, Karla, massive climate change happened in El Salvador. There was this massive monsoon in the middle of the year that, like stranded a lot of people. And that's happening all across the region to coffee producing countries. So like, I wanted to know, Casey, like, what do you think personally is up with this gatekeeping situation that we have?
That's a really interesting question, because I think that things are changing, and I think that businesses need to do good, and consumers want their money to be going into something that's doing good. But I do think a lot of the industry is still stuck in these old models of, well, a lot of old models, but in particular how we define quality. So you still see the same old on roasters. We source the best coffees from around the world and roast them to perfection. And that has been done over and over again, and people want more than that. But there are some people who they only focus on 95 plus coffees. They only go and they're only buying the top lots. And I feel like that's not sustainable. That's not sustainable for the industry. And we love specialty coffee and we want it to survive. And I think if you do, then you need to start redefining quality. It can't just be what's on the table. It just can't be.
I want to say something as well, because we ran a research recently with roasters in Europe. And one of the questions that we asked was exactly this, like, what's your main criteria for buying coffee? And still, like, quality comes up as like nearly 100% the main thing that everyone says. I look for quality, and why I look for quality is because my customers demand quality. Would you say that that's maybe kind of like a comfortable place that roasters put themselves in, and that they could be more like proactively be like challenging that, or kind of like trying to change that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is literally just ingrained. It's ingrained in people's brains. And I don't think it's necessarily true. I mean, maybe for some people and their customers, but for us and our customers, our best sellers are not the best scoring coffees.
That's really interesting to hear.
Yeah.
So just let me direct to the people watching as well. Everyone's a bit shy, everyone's a bit quiet. So please feel free to ask questions, because we already started the Q&A. I don't know if you noticed, but it's already begun. So please send your questions to Casey, to Sierra, to Karla. And if you want to ask directly, so like ask yourself, you can you raise your hand here? I don't know, but you can, if you can't raise your hand, you can ask.
We can also give you a chance to speak on camera as well if you'd like. Up to you.
So I think Lucia wants to join, maybe. Lucia Santos. Christina, can you promote her? Because Lucia is a producer as well. It'll be interesting to hear from her what she thinks. So Lucia, sorry, I put you on the spotlight.
Okay, actually, I was not going to participate, but now you, as you said, you put me on the spotlight. Well, I am very, well, you know, I just found about this short seminary, I don't know how to call it, between you guys, and I just like registered, and I'm so happy that I did, because it's incredibly, maybe it's cliche, but to see the different ways that women think and view the industry, it's amazing. And I really like what Cassie say about the fact that we shouldn't be sticking only to a certain range of coffee tasting qualities that probably have been Eurocentric, when we have such a wider range of tasting in so many different parts of the world. And then you can find so many different types of tastes. And also I also agree with you that there's so much inequality, and not everybody, and mostly most farmers don't have access to be able to keep up with the standards of quality that the industry is presently requiring from the coffee. And so I'm really glad, and whenever you want to do a virtual tour of our farm, because our farm in Honduras is, you can, it's called Café Juan Cartagena. We're in Facebook and Instagram, and you can take a look at it. It's in the middle of the jungle. We don't have internet, actually. We don't have, I couldn't do it live because there's no internet. Actually, we don't even have electricity, but we do have a dynamo and a small plant. But it's amazing. I really congratulate you all guys, and to keep on with these initiatives, because I can tell and say that the women have such a different voice and a different way of looking at things. And it's good that you're trying to bridge the gap of so much inequality. I guess that's all I have to say.
Yeah, no, Lucia, what we did with Karla as well is that the farm doesn't have very good internet either. So Karla filmed the farm beforehand. She did it on the weekend. The weather was good, all looked great. And then we kind of like shared with you today. So, because in the past we had so many technical problems as well. We tried to show the farm live. It's like, this time, let's do a recording. We can show more things. We can show more parts of the farm. And and Karla can talk about it like, well, as the video goes along. So with your farm, there's no problem that there is an internet. You can always just record it.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
We have some requests from the participants for you to write down the name of the farm. We'll share the link in the chat. So please go ahead and share with us.
I do have a follow-up question. If no one else in the chat has a question, I don't want to take up more space or time than I need to, but I did have a question for Karla off the back of Lucia's question. It just reminds me of a couple of really salty conversations we've had about processing and about experimental processing, which I know is something that you have, you know, a very nuanced opinion about. So I wanted to hear, you know, what kind of processing you do on your farm, and B, why the request for experimental processing, you know, when producers are under-resourced is quite a damaging thing to ask. So
Yeah, the thing with processing is that it's very delicate, you know, like you've worked all year for your plants to be able to grow, I guess, like as healthily as possible. And then comes a time when you pick the cherries, which is also like a very other, like very delicate stage of, you know, like it all, we've been talking about quality, and we know at this point that selective picking and like all these things, like they end up affecting the quality or the score, I guess, when you're talking about it traditionally of a coffee, right? So then when you go into things like processing, um, this is also another point where you can either add or remove from your cup's quality, right? So then, you know, like when you have a lot of mostly, unfortunately, roasters that are asking of farmers to go into processing and mostly do very like experimental things with their coffee, that becomes a very dangerous area in my opinion, because you are asking for a lot of risk for farmers to go into very risky situations, and you're not necessarily sharing that risk with them. So, you know, like as a farmer, we have one chance a year to be able to make a profit and make a living, basically, you know. So then if you're asking us to go into this risky situation where our coffee might end up either really well and it might sell really well, or we might mess it up, you know, and it might not turn out that great and it might be completely undrinkable. And then you're left with your crop that you don't know what to do with it. And that just becomes, you know, like it goes back into these power dynamics that you have between consuming countries and producing countries, where I see it mostly with older generations of coffee producers, where this dynamic is so ingrained in how they perceive the industry that if anyone from a consuming country, whether it be a roaster or an importer or anyone, really says like, oh, you should ferment your coffee this way and that way, and that's you're going to sell it, then they'll do it, you know. And we don't necessarily have the resources to be able to do these things in a way where we know that it's going to turn out well. So for example, right now, coffee fermentation, it's very popular, right? And I can't tell you how many times we've asked around how to ferment coffee, mostly out of curiosity, not even because it's something that we want to go into wholeheartedly, you know, like we've been asking this around for years now. We've asked different government entities in El Salvador how to do it. We've asked different coffee professionals, roasters, like everyone, and no one wants to share this information with you. And it wasn't until maybe this past year where we took this like very short course on coffee fermentation, and it was all very experimental. And we mostly did it, you know, like out of curiosity, just to see what would happen. We have no intent of doing this on a larger scale, but you know, like it just shows you how, I guess, like well guarded and hard to get to, like these types of education and information is for farmers. So most of the time you'll go into this without knowing what you're doing. You'll just do it because either you saw it online or someone told you that it was a good idea. And this just increments your amount of risk if you don't know what you're doing. So it's really hard and it's very delicate. And that's why in our farm, we mostly we stick to what we know. So we don't have our own mill. So all of our like washed coffee gets sent to a partner's mill. And we've been to their mill. We know how they work. We know how they store coffee. We trust them. And there's, you know, it's like everyone does what they know best within our chain. So then that's where we send our washed coffee. Our natural coffee, we have those patios. We've been able to do it well over the years, and we've seen how we've got our methods already in place of how we do it, right? We have already a team of people that know when to be moving the coffee, when it's ready, like all these things. So then we are comfortable doing naturals ourselves. But it's very hard and it's very delicate, and it does go back into all of these power dynamics that we were talking about, that are still very, very present within our coffee industry, unfortunately.
What's the best approach for you? So like if a roaster wants something different, let's say.
Mhm.
Let's say Casey wants something different. So
Mhm.
I want an anaerobic coffee. I don't know.
Mhm.
What would be the best approach for you then?
I think what I would do on my end would first, I would get help, and I would become educated as most as I can. And I guess find someone who would be willing to help me out and walk me through theoretically what this type of commitment would mean. What does it mean to ferment anaerobically within the conditions that we have at the farm? So then knowing first if it's something that we are able to do, either from all terms really, like do we have people who will be able to check on this coffee and know when it's ready? Do we have the necessary equipment in order to be able to do these things? So it's not just about knowing, reading it somewhere like, oh, okay, it's something that we can do, but do we have the conditions to store the coffee? Do we have the conditions? Do we even have the coffee that would turn out well in this situation? So it's like all of these other little factors that you have to take into account to see if you'd be if you and your coffee and your farm really would be like a good candidate for this type of experiment. And then it would definitely be about discussing things back and forth, and it would be like, okay, Casey, like we're going into this risk together. Like, are you willing to go into this as partners, and as equals? Like, what if we do everything right, but suddenly one day it rains and it gets messed up because water goes into it and it's no longer anaerobic, like, I don't know. Or maybe someone messes up and the top isn't closed properly. Whatever happens, I don't know, um are you willing to go into these types of risky situations together? Because if not, then it's like you are left with the idea that maybe we are doing something that we're not capable of doing, and we're selling something that we don't know how to do to you, which isn't ethical. And on the other end, like if it doesn't work out, then we are left with all of this coffee that we can't sell either, which isn't ethical either. So it's like going into these types of risky situations, I guess, as partners and willing to share that risk, I think is how I would address it.
And I have another question for both Casey and Karla, because you were talking about how having access to the market and talking to roasters, how that can be positive for quality in the long term. And that's kind of like this beautiful idea that we love to talk about. But sometimes I think it's also very vague for people. They think it's kind of like all this romance around coffee. And there's so much romance around coffee. But in practical terms, and I think you can talk about it based on your own experience, how does having contact with how does contact helps to improve the quality of the coffee in the long term?
I think that having this contact just like makes you have a more realistic idea of what the conditions on both ends are like, so for example, on our end, I think that having contact with roasters, it gives me a better idea, like, okay, this is how a roastery and their operations work, like, and this is what they're expecting and this is what they need. Like just maybe like a week back, we had a roaster who has bought coffee from us before, but this year he's no longer interested in natural coffee because it's really hard for him to clean his machine. I had absolutely no idea that that was a problem that came into account for roasters, and if I would not have that type of communication, then I would have never known, and unfortunately this year we only have natural, so then there's nothing that I can offer him. But it's really great to still have those types of communications because, like you said, there's a lot of romanticism about coffee and all these things, and when it's really unglamorous, it's like on the roastery end, I am assuming that cleaning gunk from coffee from a roastery isn't very glamorous,
Nightmare.
just as the same, like walking through a farm, it's not glamorous either. And farming in general isn't glamorous at all, and sometimes things happen. And like with Casey, we were talking about the insect damage that we discussed about. Okay, like we had that whole conversation, and that is something that I guess we're both more aware of now. Like, okay, like now I know how insect damage translates into the roastery, and I think that Casey now has a better idea of what it's like to control insect damage on the farm level. Because things happen. Like I said, like it's completely unglamorous, and maybe, like last year when we had all of these weird rains that were happening throughout the year, Maybe insect damage wasn't the problem for us this year, but it was definitely an oversaturation of water. Excessive rainfall, like that was a problem for us this year. And it's something that we have completely no control over. And, you know, like I said, like farming is unglamorous and things will happen. But if you have these types of conversations and communication, then you have a better idea of how both ends work, and you can work together and say like, okay, this year, this is the status of my farm and this is what's happened. And this is what the best representation that my coffee can be this year, considering these climatic conditions or whatever it was. So I think that it definitely takes away that whole romanticism and it grounds you a little bit more. And it shows you, I guess, like the real side and unglamorous side of coffee operations.
Do you want to add anything, Casey?
I mean, I think Karla covered everything, but I do think she brought up a really important point about the power structures and having these relationships. For me, one of the most important things is the flow of information back to producers, because we ask a lot of producers, like as roasters and buyers in general, or we get a lot of information from them, but very little information is going back the other way. So we talk about transparency a lot, but there's not a lot of two-way transparency. You know, we want to know numbers, we want to know farm gate price, we want to know FOB, but you know, how much information is actually going back to producers? And that's the barrier to stopping producers from having the same sort of power, you know, from knowing what consumers are looking for knowing how the whole market works, for knowing how their coffee is sold. And when, I mean, I don't know if you agree, Karla, but if producers have access to all of this information, then they might have a better idea of how much their coffee is actually worth and be able to say, well, actually, I'm going to charge you this much because I know, I understand the market a bit more. So I think when, you know, when we talk, when you can actually talk to someone face to face, you begin to understand a little bit. There's a bit more of a flow of information.
Absolutely. No, I think that that's definitely like a really strong point that you made. When we were just starting out and we were transitioning our farm, we had absolutely no idea whatsoever of the value of our coffee. And, you know, we asked around different people in El Salvador, and they coming back from these like very old trains of thought where it's very, I guess, like abusive relationship between consumers and producers, right? They were telling us like, oh no, you shouldn't ask, the market price right now is at this price and you shouldn't ask for more than this much, which was like really not even that much. Definitely did not cover your cost of production, definitely did not reflect the quality of the coffee, definitely, you know, like it was an extremely low price. And that was what we went in with, because that is what we knew and that is what people were telling us. And I remember that I sent you that offer, Casey, and you were like, are you sure that's what you want to charge?
This was so embarrassing because I remember the wording. I asked you, do you think that's a fair price? And I meant, do you think that that's enough? But you came back to me saying, I spoke to my family, we can go down on price. And I was absolutely mortified. Like, that is not what I meant at all.
Yeah, you know, because it's like, that's what people were telling us. And these are people that come from a long history of selling their coffee directly, you know, like this was, and I know that they had our best interest at heart. And they were like, if you go more for the, then if you ask for more than this, like they won't buy your coffee and this and that. And I was like, oh my God, okay. So I was like, Casey, we can even go lower if you want.
Oh God.
But it's just like the fact that, you know, like Casey had, I guess, like the fact that we were in conversation and the fact that she asked and she was like, really, you know, like, are you sure? I was like, oh my God, wait, maybe, you know, like that was like lights and everything were happening. I was like, maybe this is actually a low price. It's not that we're asking for too much. Maybe we're asking for too little. And the next year, you know, like after which I had a few conversations with other roasters and they were like, Karla, no, that is that is not the price for your coffee. And I'm like, I know it's not, but like, are people willing to pay more, this and that, you know? And at the same time, we had our costs increase at the farm. We were investing in a few other things. So then our costs had gone up, the cost of processing had gone up. So I was like, okay, fine, you know, like, I'll hear you out. 2 or 3 roasters that are super nice and like genuine, and maybe you're onto something, and we increased our prices to better reflect our cost of production. And, you know, like, absolutely nothing happened, in the sense that we didn't lose clients. On the other end, we had more people buying from us. No one to this day has asked for like any sort of discount or anything, you know. It's like everything has been very fair and transparent, I think. And that comes through from being on a conversation with roasters. And that is something that we learned from that experience.
Nice. I think we're a bit beyond time here, and I think Christina is gonna like start talking to me. Luisa, let's call it over, call it a day. But I just wanted to do 2 more things. One thing, I wanted Casey to show us some of Karla's coffee that she has at the roastery. That would be very nice. And the second thing is a question for all of you. It's about, what do you think other female producers have to do to gain more market access? Because I know it's not just like this kind of thing has to come from roasters and from producers. Both is something that has to come from both sides. But like from the producer's perspective, what do you think? That is it like a case of like telling their stories better? Is it a case of putting themselves more out there? How can they compete better in the market that's a very like male dominated market? Especially for roasters, not especially, but like for roasters as well. It's like a lot of male roasters. There's not a lot of cases out there. So how to approach a male roaster, how to talk to a male roaster, you know?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question. I'll let Karla answer about producers. On our side of the industry, and it can be intimidating. It's an intimidating, well, being a female roaster, for one, there aren't many. There are some. I've seen some on this call, but in general, it's mainly men. In all, you know, cupping events that we go to, it's mainly men, and it you can feel intimidated. And I personally am not a very outgoing person. I'm quite shy. So one thing I'm doing is trying to, you know, say yes to things like this, because it's important that people see more of our faces. And it's also why we do what we do in sharing stories and putting women front and center on our packaging. And, you know, everything we do is just about recognition and celebration and acknowledgement of women in the industry.
Karla, Sierra?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely, I think that we can do is take up space, like take up more space, and not be scared. I'm also very intimidated by a lot of people in this industry, because we've all heard, you know, about like coffee bros and like all these things, especially like cuppings and things like that. And it's, you know, just as hostile as it is for women, in roasting, in cafe areas, in all of these other parts of the industry. It's the same in farming. So it's, you know, like a lot of spaces where maybe being a woman isn't normal or a traditional thing to be in coffee. So it's like, definitely just like take up these spaces and be less scared. And I think that one thing that I've been trying to do is just like this thing of like fake it till you make it, you know. Like I remember the first days when I started cupping, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Like I didn't even know what I was looking for. And of course, a lot of men, you know, with like their super loud slurps and being like, oh yeah, the mouth feel and like blah, 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 all these things. And they'd be like, what do you think? And I didn't know what I thought, you know? So I would just make up things, honestly. But I tried to be as confident as I could with these made up comments about coffee. And I would just say like very generic things like, oh yeah, it's a washed Central America and super chocolatey, blah, 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 blah. But I tried to say it with confidence, and I noticed that even though I was completely pulling things out of nowhere, there was suddenly more respect towards me because I looked confident, you know? So it's like, and this is something that applies to women in like any field and in anything really in life, unfortunately. So that is definitely what I've tried to do, just like be more confident about my ideals, my values, where I stand, this and that, and try to get as much access to education about things. That way I know what I'm talking about. You know, it's like now I actually know how to cup. I actually know what I'm talking about on a cupping table, and I actually can own it a lot better and tell men, you know, like, oh no, actually this is not this, it's that other thing that we're talking about. Exactly. So it's just like, haha, take that, you know. But it's like it's really hard, and I think that something else that I'm trying to do personally is also like share resources with other women, or anyone who might be marginalized within the industry. So if you look a little funky for whatever reason within our industry, meaning that you're not a man, it's like, and I have whatever resource that I can share with you, and that will help you own it and fake it a little bit better and be a little bit more confident. It's like, I'll just share it with you, whatever it is. Like, I don't care. You know, as long as there are more women and like people just like owning it and like making themselves be heard, I think that is where these areas and points of resistance like really start to make a difference, and more people start to feel comfortable, because at the end of the day, you know, it's like, we're talking about coffee. We're not sending people to the moon. We're not developing the COVID vaccine. You know, it's like nothing that is, I don't know, like out of the ordinary. It's coffee, really. And people should feel comfortable because it's part of everyone's life, literally. So it's like, people deserve to feel comfortable in this industry. I think that that's part of it. Just like sharing with a lot of people, and making sure more people feel comfortable.
Awesome. Sierra, come on, say something as well, because you own it as well.
I mean, I'm just nodding along, like these women have said it all. I guess my big takeaways from what you guys have said, Karla and Casey, is that, well, don't let imposter syndrome, you know, shut your mouth. Like, speak up and be unapologetic, which is what I love so much about your brand, Casey and Fee. I remember you told me once that you set up for, was it London Coffee Festival or something, and a couple of guys walked past and they were like, haha, girls who grind. And I was like, yeah, have you got a problem? Have you got a problem? And yeah, like, just own the space unapologetically. And I just think that's so refreshing. And Karla, so much of the advocacy that you do as a lead scholar and, you know, as your own self is so important. And I think what's so interesting is that from the fact that we're all here, coffee is such a vehicle for social activism today. And I think a lot of companies that don't get on this bandwagon are actually lagging behind, because coffee is being used to push a lot of change at the moment. And it's so important, because I think we're leveling the playing field for a lot of, you know, marginalized folks, like you said, Karla. And I guess my two big takeaways for everyone on this call is to question everything, question all the structures that you see, question all the habits. Like, when you want to feature a roaster, like, what demographic do they tend to sell to? You know, who do they buy from? Like, what coffees do they use? Is it just 90 plus coffees? Are they alienating anyone with a lower score? And then for, I suppose, the you know, the men who are running coffee companies, like, amplify, you know, these women voices. I know Casey, Dark Arts recently featured you know, your coffee on their social media, and when I saw that, I was like, that's incredible. Like, that's exactly what you should be doing. You should be amplifying, you know, voices that you know, have something to say. So yeah, that's my roundup.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone, like, for so many good ideas and so much inspiration. Casey, can you show us that coffee before we finish?
Let's see, it's a sack of coffee.
I don't think we're going to hear her very well, but that's okay. Hey. Nice. You're not very fussed about having the proper logo on the coffee sack, are you?
No?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was Karla's washed and some roll, which I was roasting earlier today. Tasting super delicious.
Nice. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And just one more thing, if you guys want to send Karla a message, if you're interested in her coffee, you can find her profile on the platform is Finca San Antonio Amatepec, and you can message her directly. And doesn't matter if you go through WhatsApp or Instagram after that, like just drop her a line. She's just very responsive, very nice to talk to. And her coffee is going to be available very soon. And if you liked this virtual trip, we have regular virtual trips going on at the moment. You can go to algrano.com and subscribe to our next one, which will be in April. So thank you very much, everyone, again, and have a good day. Bye-bye.